Hi and welcome to Philosophy with Phil, with me, Phil Cohen. For this video we're going to look at meditation, and I thought I'd do things a little bit differently for this video. I won't be appearing in this video, but we'll use the candles of the menorah, what with it being the first night of Hanukkah, as a way of concentrating, giving us something to contemplate on while we discuss this theme. Before I go on, I should refer you back to a couple of other videos I've done that may be of interest, that will serve as a bit of a background to this subject. The videos on the human psyche and the video on the shekel, which looked at things like individuality and consciousness and the human mind. The verse that's usually used to introduce this subject is a verse from Proverbs, from Mishlei, chapter 20, verse 27. Ner Hashem nishmas Adam, that the soul of man is a candle of God. And as we look into the lights of the menorah, we can see that the components of a candle and its flame can be matched up with the components of the human soul. That there is a physical entity, the fuel, the candle itself, or the oil. And there's the flame, the spiritual dimension, that yearns ever upwards to connect with its source. And sitting between those two is the wick that sort of holds the two together. And so the candle represents that transition from the physicality to the spiritual world. And that very much is what meditation is about channeling our physical resources to spiritual betterment, as we'll see. Jewish meditation is unlike other forms of meditation in that they often seek to calm the mind as a way to revitalize the body. However, in Jewish meditation, we seek to calm down the physical demands of the body to be able to enliven the mind. To paraphrase the opening words of Kuntras Avoda, which was a tractate of an essay written by the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe on the subject of meditation. He sees meditation as a way of combining two of the mitzvahs that we've discussed previously on when we talked about thought and thought crime, that involved conceptualization. And he says that we are obligated to love God and we're obligated to fear God. Love being an emotion, whereas fear being more an appreciation, an intellectual appreciation. And he sees Jewish meditation as a way of combining those two towards our service of God and our understanding of his ways. I have to sort of come in with a story from my first experience of yeshiva. I was very naive before I went to yeshiva, and I thought it would be like a health spa, like one of these calming, tranquil places where you go to relax and to learn about spirituality and sit on a carpet with crossed legs and sort of soak in what it is about God that we can appreciate. You can imagine my surprise when I walked into the Beis HaMedrash and it was full of boys shouting and screaming at each other across Gemaras. And I couldn't understand how that was a way of learning. I'd just finished my academic studies, and there you go into a library and you can hear a pin drop. It's so quiet. The difference couldn't have been more stark. But in Judaism, we learn and we meditate. through speech. The reason being goes back to what we were saying about combining the intellectual faculties with our physical faculties. That the throat, the voice, is the conduit between the head and the body. Anatomically, that's where it sits. And just as the throat and the neck and the voice connects the head and the body, so too it's what we use through prayer and meditation to connect those two abilities in our service of God. In Hebrew, the word for throat or neck is oref, ayin resh pei. Interestingly, the opposite of the word oref, pei resh ayin, is the word Pharaoh, the name of the Egyptian king. Pharaoh very much sought to restrict our speech. In fact, we see that on Pesach, which celebrates our release from Egyptian servitude, a lot of the obligations revolve around speech and eating, reciting the Haggadah, eating the matzah in the morrow, and so on. Because we believe that part of the servitude, part of the restrictions that were imposed on us, were through our ability to speak. If one looks in the Torah, for example, you can see that to begin with, Exodus chapter 3 verse 6, the word sakar is used to cry out, like a baby crying. Later on, Exodus chapter 6 verse 5, there is a naka, there's a groaning sound, a little bit more sophisticated, sounds more like friction, like the sound that you get when you're scraping against something that breaks on an engine. And we learn later on in Exodus chapter 6 verse 9 that the Jews were suffering from mikotze ruach, that their depression, as it's sometimes translated, was as a result of shortness of breath. But this developed into ultimately from the cry to the groan through to songs of praise at the splitting of the sea. And it was our development of speech that was part and a critical part of our freedom from enslavement. The Jews are named after the fourth son that Leah gave birth to. His name was Yehuda. So we are Yehudim, Jews. And she gives him his name because she sings praise to God for giving birth to a fourth son. And if there's one thing that identifies us out as Jews, is our ability to sing, is our ability to praise to God, as indeed through the Psalms, through the Tehillim, and through our prayers. But she had three sons before him, Reuben, Shimon, and Levi. And we often find in the Torah that before one of the patriarchs, or one of the key figures, is about to undertake a meditative experience, religious experience, let's say, they often undergo 3 stages in preparation to that, leading to the 4th stage, which is the prayer itself, the meditation itself. So, for example, Abraham goes on a 3-day journey before arriving at the scene of the binding of Isaac at the Akedah, at Mount Horeb. Moses asks for the Jews to go on a 3-day journey before they arrive at the place where they can worship their God, when he asks for his people to leave Egypt. And similarly, there are 3 blessings at the beginning and 3 at the end of the Amida, and we take 3 steps backwards, or 3 steps forwards, more importantly, in terms of preparation for our prayers. And we see in Shachar, in the morning prayers, for example, that there are 3 stages of preparation we go through to before we go on to the Amida. There is Birchas HaShachar and Pezukei de Zimra. Then there is the Shema, and then the Amida itself. The reason for these 3 stages of preparation are for us to familiarise ourselves with the 3 components that are required for any meaningful relationship, which is what we are undertake with when we go through the process of prayer or meditation. Firstly, we need to appreciate and understand ourselves. And in the opening section of our davening on Birchas HaShachar, we introduce ourselves through the spiritual dimension of ourselves, through the Birchas HaShachar itself, and through the physical, animalistic side of ourselves, through the korbanos, the sacrifices. We then, for the second stage, go through Pezukei de Zimra, where we sing praises about God. And once we've introduced ourselves to God, we then have to bridge that gap and define the relationship that exists between us. And we do that through the Shema, which sets out the relationship that we have with God and the relationship he has with us and how he controls the world. Once we've done that, we are ready to go ahead and pray and meditate. Nachman of Breslov is someone who we can't really give a talk on meditation on without mentioning. He really championed the idea of Hisbonenus, which literally translated means building. He saw the alignment between, or the resolution of the tension between the intellect and the emotion as part of the character building process we must undergo to enhance our relationship with God, and to ensure that all our actions, our thoughts and our speech are focused and channeled in the right way. What you could say is it's his way of aligning what you ought to do with what you want to do. He would famously take some of his pupils out to the forests and separate them out, okay, and then get them to talk to God in a very open and frank and candid way, talking to God as if he was standing there right in front of them, spelling out their needs and wants, their thoughts and fears, their concerns, talking to God as if he were a king who they could talk to on a one-to-one basis. In his writings, he talks when he talks about prayer, he talks about 2 scenarios. And I think the way to resolve these different scenarios is to say that they're talking on different levels. He says, on the one hand, when one's in prayer, one should imagine that it is just oneself and God, and that there are no distractions or anything else in the way, just as you would if you were going to see a real-life flesh and blood king or queen. It's very hard to imagine, if you were standing in front of the king or queen, anything else going on in the background that would distract you. But he also describes a scenario where it is just God, and that you cease to exist and you melt away. And as I say, that to me is a high level of prayer. That is where your Ratzon, your free will, is so subsumed with what it ought to be, with what it is wanting, in terms of connecting and elevating your thoughts and actions higher and higher. That it is just God. It's just about what God wants. And that everything that you want is there in order for you to achieve God's will. Not just for your own benefit, but for the benefit of those around you and the benefit of mankind as a whole. So meditation, to sum up, is very much linked with prayer. It's very much about verbal expression, but it's about alignment. And if you look at the video we've done on prayer, on tefillah, you'll see that that is exactly the same thing. Making sure that what you want is going to be for your benefit and is going to help you ultimately come closer to God and those around you. Thanks a lot for watching, and Shabbat Shalom.